That was and still is the slogan my real estate agency runs with whenever you call them up for any issue, usually spoken in an irritating and saccharine tone you expect when making dreaded insurance premium payments or ordering a Chipotle at 2 a.m. They weren't wrong, though. Since I moved in here half a decade ago, seeing so many folks come, go, and lurk the halls with their various stories, it's very apparent that their journeys do indeed run parallel with the apartment. It shifts, grows, and changes to adapt to its new inhabitants. If someone with a gothic sensibility moves in, you feel a darker vibe in their hallway, corvids congregating outside their windows, and a sense that you absolutely have to go and listen to The Cure when you get in. You know, stuff like that. Hell, the night I moved in, I was lucky enough to see a beautiful comet fly past us at such a close proximity. It brought a beautiful color with it that I swear is still in the sky even now. But with the lockdown in place across the world, and of course in my area, now felt as good a time to tell you some of the stories I've compiled over my time living here. Some of which run the spectrum of mild to batshit insane, but I assure you, they're all true. My name is Cassidy Lizel, but you can call me Cass for short. I run an online manuscript editing service, and I've become pretty adept at it. It allows me to pay the bills and live in relative comfort, surrounded by the exotic pets I've compiled over time. My green sea turtle, His Excellency Walter Huffington IV, or Walter for short. My council of Old World and New World spiders I routinely seek advice from on tough days, and last, but in no way least, my chameleon, Gus, who usually sits in my shirt pocket. He likes it there best. When I'm not fielding manuscript requests in my study/meditation room, I love to tend to my carnivorous plants, watch the moon sing as it dances in the sky, or talk to my neighbors. It's the latter that brings me to all of you. I should probably get it out of the way now, but if the title doesn't tip you off to the obvious, yeah, I'm an agoraphobic, and I can't leave my apartment block, sometimes not even my house. Emphasis on can't. Used to be able to go into public spaces, but the fear is too strong now, and some days I can't even go into my hallways. No, it doesn't mean I'll crumble if I step outside of my doorstep. Maybe I'll elaborate another time on it, but for the story I want to tell, it's not relevant. Let's start with the usual occurrences, shall we? Every morning at 11:11, right as a pelican lands on the balcony of apartment 21 above me, I'll awaken to hear the sounds of frustrated chanting and a thick Italian voice belting. Nessun dorma by Pavarotti with a large orchestra behind him. When he hits the high note and holds it, impressively, I might add, there's a flash of light that blacks out the sky for a moment before he sneezes, apologizes, and declares the song has been sung, the day has now begun, and punching the pelican to signify its unwanted presence. The kicker, there's nobody in that room. I've checked with management when I phoned in a noise complaint after a particularly loud incident early on, citing a psychotic break or just some dickish behavior on the neighbor's part. But no, the room has a severe mold issue, and the renovations are marred in legal issues with the landlord, so it's simply been quarantined. Makes me wonder what the hell is there, because I'll occasionally hear soft weeping, Latin scripture, or someone calling out frantically for Virgil before the pelican returns, and it falls deathly silent. Then there's the garbage men. They turn up every third Wednesday in the dead of night to take our trash, but I have never seen anyone step in or out of their truck. Hell, I've never even seen the truck. I just heard the sound effects and the crumpling of garbage before they scurry off in the night. Thankful I'm a night owl who isn't disturbed by the noises. And I've tried to see them. Honest to God, I have. I snuck into my hallway and kept the motion sensors off, phone light as my torch, like some shitty level in Resident Evil, but I could only see large shapes as I rounded the corner overlooking our dumpster area at the back of Rubicon's building. Now, you might think this is just the product of an overactive imagination by an agoraphobic millennial, right? Well, I'd agree with you and ask how you knew my age bracket, but it was their conversations that caught my suspicions. See, my apartment is located on a far corner, third of 6 floors, and it's positioned very well to hear most folks with open windows or the streets below. Third of 6 floors, and is positioned very well to hear most folks with open windows or the streets below. So, after a few months of curiosity, wondering why the smell was always of phosphorus and not sweet rot, I went to do some inspecting/snooping in my makeshift garden. It's an enclosed conservatory converted from an extended balcony, but it has large bay windows if I need fresh air and for my plants to pollinate and eat. I craned my neck out one cold morning and heard their conversation that I'd only heard through muffles before.
All right, Bob. This is our last stop.
You ready?
That's what I ask my wife every night.
They both laugh before I hear some hauling, slamming, and crunching sounds and the roar of an engine as it takes off and they continue into the night. Seems normal, right? Well, I tried this again the following month, the one after that, and even the third after that, as we got into spring. It was the same conversation, the timing exact, and down to the same awkward exchange and laugh. I could have blasted a pre-recorded laugh track from my phone the moment the joke landed, but the spiders said I'd get caught if that happened, and they didn't want to see me turn into fly meat. I told them this was a weird analogy, and my Arizona blonde, Madame Rumble, kicked hairs at me. Bitch. I tried one last time in May, monitoring the weather app for sunrise as it inched closer and closer to their usual pickup time. Knowing this was my last chance for at least 4 months, I remained vigilant. In the hour leading up, Gus popped out my pocket and ran down my arm, clinging to my wrist as his eyes darted around for food. He swayed in the gentle breeze as he ate a stray fly, his green hue slowly changing to a gentle blue. You know, in the realms of this garden, you really are my own garbage man, Gus, I said, stroking his back softly. He was a very clingy chameleon, and I always felt less alone with him around. There was a whooshing sound, and Gus's scales changed from blue to a deep red as his mouth opened and he swayed harder on my arm, tail raised and one eye up at me as the other stared out on the twilight ground. Standing where the truck usually resided were 2 middle-aged men in lederhosen, silver muskets on their backs and a vacant stare in their eyes as they met my own. The strangest thing was the sounds the man on the left made. I could see his mouth moving, but no words coming out. Instead was a guttural rumbling that resembled the sound of the truck. The man on the right whispered to him, and then both nodded to the dumpster ahead, some 10 feet away from them. Something darted from the building and into the darkness. I couldn't tell you what it was, but both men had their eyes fixed on me as it did its business. I didn't dare move, though I knew they couldn't exactly get up here some 40 feet in the air. But Gus seemed to have other ideas as he bit me hard on my finger, forcing me to break eye contact and move away from the window. After knowing what I know now, he's clearly smarter than I am and deserves way more bugs. When I looked back, they'd vanished. I didn't search for the garbage men again until the festival incident. I'm as certain today as I was then that the garbage men are up to something, but they're the least of these apartment's concerns and are nowhere near the weirdest. Lastly, every day at lunch, someone knocks at my door for a conversation. Most of my neighbors and I can communicate through the video intercom system, attaching picture for post. It's convenient and allows us to reach one another in emergencies. Obviously, we have phones and whatnot too, but this person prefers a more direct approach. I remember the first time it happened. I'd been in the apartment for a year and hadn't been outside in around 4 months. The knock was gentle, rhythmic, and the sound of a hand dragging down the wood could be heard as they finished knocking. It was unusual, to say the least. I had a latchkey, a deadbolt, and a tumbler lock, so I wasn't overly concerned. But there's always a feeling of dread when a stranger knocks at your door in a secure apartment complex. Looking into the peephole, I saw the frame of a young woman leaning against the back wall. She was beaten, bloody, and out of breath, eyes darting from left to right in a frantic manner. Yes? Can I help you, ma'am? I called out, her face snapping to the door as soon as I spoke.
Someone is following me. I need you to let me in, please.
She begged, clutching at a gash on her arm, blood rushing down and making a stain on the carpet. I felt uneasy. What happened to you? I'll push the panic button and get security here right now. I leaned over as the intercom is next to our main doors, but she slammed her fist against the door and I backed up.
No, I need you to let me in.
She breathed, wheezing as the exertion of energy made her sway. Before I could even reply, she looked over to the far hallway and heard the elevator rising.
Lift going up.
It called out, the rising of the metal box now bringing a fresh wave of mania to this poor woman's face.
Oh God, he's coming. You didn't see me, okay? Just don't look into the peephole, don't answer at the door, and do not ask him to turn around.
She breathed before gripping her arm one last time and flashing me a terrified smile.
Wish me luck.
She darted out of view, and I closed the peephole.
3rd floor, doors opening.
It chimed as a thick, earthy smell wafted under my doorframe. I held my nose and tried not to cough as something rustled and dragged itself out of the elevator, down the hall, and towards my door.
Cassidy. Little Cassidy.
It cooed, Louisiana voice like sandpaper rubbing against the doorframe.
You seen my quarry anywhere? My little bird always keeps her eyes open.
My blood ran cold. Only a few people knew that name. None of them were around anymore. I opened my mouth to speak and remembered what she told me. I stayed silent, and eventually it made a sound before dragging down the hallway. That was the day our ritual began. The day I met Petra. Despite the reputation, she always remembered, though I would never let her in. Some days we'd get no time at all, and others we'd get a solid half hour. When the lift began chiming to go up, she'd tell me to wish her luck, and I would sit against the door quietly for 5 minutes until her pursuer moved on. It would call me by that nickname, or use a smell that reminded me of my childhood, but I did as I was instructed, and never looked or replied. That is, until last week. I didn't know if it was the way this time went, or something about the whole ritual that just irritated me to the point of frustration, but I decided enough was enough. Petra showed up, and before she could even open her mouth, I threw open the door and held out my hand. "Come on, let's get this over with," I said, beaming. But instead of looking pleased, she instead looked horrified at the prospect. You were never supposed to. What have you done, Cass?" She breathed, the wound on her arm disappearing immediately and the bruises fading as she repeated, "Oh no," with increased panic. "They said that you never..." Lift going up. Our eyes looked down the hallway, and in that moment, Petra took my hand and practically toppled into my dark hallway, falling face first and coming eye to eye with Walter, who stared at her before yawning as I slammed the door behind her, locking it up. "I'm going to look today, Petra," I affirmed as she regained her composure. "You're what?" she yelled before I put a hand out to silence her. 3rd floor, doors opening. "I have to know, Petra," I said, looking at her for a moment before glancing back. In that instant, I fell backwards and stared in horror at the peephole. A body wrapped in white plastic and sheets, keeping the head exposed and skin blackened beyond recognition, greeted me. Eyes deadened, and the whites giving way to small black pupils as a gray iris as yellow, broken teeth were bared in a grin. All it did was laugh, stretching its mouth wide and showing a black hole where flesh should be, before walking away. "Things are about to get interesting, little bird. Trapped no more." I turned to ask Petra what it meant, but she was gone, as if she'd never been there. We didn't speak much, and she said she'd come by when she knew it was safe, whatever that meant. I spoke to the council about it, but they didn't say much. My Brazilian red knee, Mr. Crackle, simply tapped his front feet as he ate. The counselor to his left, my Goliath bird-eater, Mustang, simply said, "Be wary, be alert, be steady, be inert," before bolting to his burrow before I could tell him that made little to no sense. The rest simply looked at me expectantly, as if I'd got more to say. When I didn't, they went back to doing their own thing. There's a lot of other unusual things here that I haven't touched upon, like my next-door neighbor who built his own wife, the janitor that never takes off his plague mask, or Mistress Ophelia, who I have reason to believe is more than human, especially with so many visitors, but never anyone leaving. But I'll have to stop here for now. It's lunchtime, and someone just knocked at the door. Part 2. I'm an agoraphobic in the strangest apartment complex this side of sanity. With the lockdown going on, I decided now was as good a time as any to share my stories as frequently as possible. I mentioned yesterday that after breaking a daily ritual and opening the door to someone in need, there was a knock at the door. It was Petra. No wounds or panic in her face as she spoke to me through the door. It felt safe enough to open the door again, but she shook her head. Instead, she wrote something on the wall before putting a finger to her lips and walking out of sight. All loops must eventually be broken. All things must reset. Wish me luck. I'm not sure what the hell it meant, but after my secluded silence as the bagged wonder mocked me right on time, the writing was gone from the wall. It's already past 2 p.m. here, and Petra hasn't knocked at the door, so I'm going to assume whatever she's doing will take some time. She's smart, but I worry about her. Either way, that's not the focus of today's story. I just wanted to keep you guys informed. I wanted to tell you about some of my neighbors. I'm not sure if all of them tie into the ongoings here or are simply a byproduct, but one thing is for sure. There's plenty who know and take advantage. We use the video intercom system mostly for emergencies in case someone falls and can't contact the ambulance or if there's a lockdown situation like now, but even then, it's rare to have someone randomly call you out of the blue. Mistress Ophelia over in apartment 16 is one of our few residents who I speak to on a regular basis, mainly because of her constant clients coming to her apartment at all hours. For whatever inane reason, I'm the apartment they call to get through to her. I should clarify, Mistress Ophelia is a jack-of-all-trades tutor and self-proclaimed healer. Her clientele is varied, but usually shares one unique trait that you'll all come to understand: desperation. Sometimes there'll be young women no older than 18, eager to see her and full of enthusiasm to share their souls with her. Other times, they're despondent, middle-aged men, haggard and looking for anyone to hear their story, some even talking my ear off when they see me on the intercom, desperate for human contact. On more than one occasion, I've even seen children with their parents going up, the children always sickly and the parents exhausted beyond measure. They always come at sunset and no matter the weather. One guy even arrived amid Storm Persephone and said, "I've traveled 400 miles for this woman. I'm not letting nature interfere now," while fist-sized hailstones pelted his back. Sometimes these people leave with a renewed sense of purpose, crying that they know what to do with their lives or have regained a love for their passion. I saw a woman enter with her head draped in misery and leave with a newborn baby that was absolutely hers. One man made a point to call me again and thank me, saying he knew he didn't have long, but that he was grateful for what he'd been shown. I'll normally hear the sounds of a roaring fire, light-hearted conversation with pleasant music, and the jaunty, infectious laugh of the mistress. She's as alluring as some of you may be picturing, a real-life Morticia Addams, but with a lot more tattoos and an Irish accent. I admit, I've been tempted to come up to hers before. She's even invited me for a private tutoring session and says she can help put the control back in my life that I so desperately want. But I've so far been able to decline. The thing is, not every client comes back from their scheduled appointments with our fair mistress. I've gotten quite adept at knowing which ones never to send those steps to. While they're all desperate, there's usually very particular times some clients show up that helps me know when to try in vain to turn them away. It is always a night sky impossibly clear, Jupiter more visible than usual, so close that I can see the shifting storms under its atmosphere. There's always a second planet in equal size and 3 times the brightness appearing on the opposite side of the sky, both planets blinking periodically, the frantic nature of the client growing in unison. Then, when I inevitably fail to convince them and buzz them in, I close my curtains, put my noise-canceling headphones on, and lay on my bed with Walter resting peacefully on my chest, forever thankful he enjoys my company during the night feasts. What follows is nothing short of hearing a meat grinder in use while the meat is still conscious. Sometimes there will be light conversation, chanting, a storm will billow outside that I learned early on to not look at, a wet sloshing sound, and many, many crunches. The mistress will always signify she's finished with an ear-piercing scream and vomiting that proceeds for far longer than any person should be able to. There'll be other voices too, distorted ones that seem elated and bordering on the pornographic, as they chew, swallow, and they too begin to vomit. I looked outside during one of these incidents once. I saw the two planets move to look at me as the surrounding stars curled into a wide smile. A purple comet flashing past as I shut my curtains and looked at Gus. The council of spiders were so angry with me that those who hadn't rushed into their burrows kicked hairs at me and shouted, "Betrayer," for a solid half hour. I had to give them a lot of super worms to make up for it. I'll admit I've had more than one night terror when falling asleep, and a far older, more wretched version of Mistress Ophelia looming over my bed, naked and covered in sores. Her face practically ancient, and the mouth almost toothless save for a few jagged remains, always locked in a sickening grimace. Her body never shifts from its position on the bed. I'm always paralyzed with fear, and her head takes its time stretching from the body, painfully slowly moving towards me with glee. I always wake up in a cold sweat and the sound of my intercom ringing. I don't know if it's intentional, and to be frank, I don't want to. I don't truly know what she is, but I do know that she is dangerous. She will sometimes call me when I'm sleeping, no matter the time of day or night, seemingly knowing I'm sleeping, and looking somehow even more beautiful each time, asking me if I wanted to know the secret to being free of myself. Whatever the hell that means. Since I put my intercom on low volume, she's tried calling more frequently. Maybe it's the lack of clientele. Either way, I don't really want to pick up. Not all my neighbors are bad, though. The Vershas, who live across from me, are a wonderful family. They do my care packages and get all my groceries to my doorstep, knowing that even going into the halls can sometimes be too much. They even put in encouraging notes and their own recipes from time to time. Some of the notes are admittedly a bit stranger than others. Cass, remember to always use sage. A nice cooking tip, if you ask me. Cass, your turtle sees behind doors we can never unlock. Protect him. The only doors he sees behind are the ones with food he's slowly but surely rushing towards. Greedy little bastard. Cass, please ask your spiders to congregate at a more sociable time. It's agitating our toes. That one is weird, but fair. Cass, when you see us next, please don't ask why we sound different. Please, just play along. I did, and they seemed fine, just a lot more saliva than usual on my packages, and when they talked, but I'm sure they were just hungry. Either way, they're the kind of neighbors who you'd be happy to have living nearby. You can always rely on. My next-door neighbor, Dr. Tanaka, however, was definitely one of those kinds of neighbors. In his late 30s, wiry black hair always jutting out in various sections like a topiary piece gone mad, thick glasses shining off in the intercom camera, and a voice so fervent and loud I can practically hear it through the walls. Until Christmas time, I'd get a call from him on the 4th of every month asking me to join his Church of the Fourth Kind. The notion of rescinding all control, letting go and allowing something more than you to take charge. Let the body go to gain a better understanding. We are but puppets for gods to play with, to assist them in their own growth. I've seen the light and taken them to me. Won't you join me, Cat? You are a person of interest. They've told me as such, and I know you could benefit from their knowledge. When I'd politely decline, he'd either rant off camera for a few moments while I nonchalantly stand there like an idiot, usually petting Gus or feeding Walter until he hangs up. Sometimes, however, he'd put his wife on to persuade me. This wouldn't have been so bad if he actually had a wife, instead of just a crude drawing on his hand that he put to the screen and mimicked in a shrill, unpleasant tone. It sounds funny, and to begin with, it was. I caught myself hoping he'd do it more after the first couple of encounters, but eventually it became uncomfortable to watch him fall into the character so wholeheartedly, arguing with himself off camera as his wife shrieked obscenities. It was one such occasion that warranted his inclusion in my list of neighbor tales. He'd caught me on a busy afternoon, and I was busy filling the water dish for the council when he called. Head Old World, Council Trejo. My cobalt blue, Cereopagopus levidum, had somehow managed to get into an altercation with lower seat councillor Madame Rumble. Something about property damage. Either way, he'd lost a leg, and she was in a fuss as she paced her enclosure. So I was heavily distracted and told Tanaka as such. Look, Doc, I'm dealing with a domestic issue over here that if I don't mediate soon will turn into a bloodbath and... Gus, don't eat that! I shrieked as Gus had begun chewing on the counselor's discarded leg. Grabbing him and coming back to the phone, I was taken aback when I saw the receiver hadn't been put down properly. The conversation between Dr. Tanaka and his wife still continuing as if he genuinely believed she was real. It was more unsettling than most things I've witnessed here. A lonely man being berated by his own imagination.
You're a failure, Seguro. Always have been, always will be. Your ancestors are ashamed of you. I'm ashamed of you. This poor neighbor is ashamed of you.
She shrieked, the hand stretching and fingers clicking with emphasis as the balled-up fist of Dr. Tanaka shook next to it.
I am trying my best, Marcia. This isn't exactly easy when I don't always have control. I do what I can with the time I have.
He slammed his fist free into the wall, and I felt the thump on my side. There was a pause before the hand sighed, and I swear to God the drawn-on eyes moved to me for a moment, before snapping back to their original position.
Then maybe we need a different approach. I think we need a consultation.
It said, wearily and with a degree of malice.
No, please. It's not come to that, has it? I could get them on board, I swear.
The hand raised itself, then silenced the doctor. I was transfixed. This was the most surreal shit I'd ever seen. I wanted to grab some food, but I couldn't look away.
You've had years. We'll be rotating back around soon, and things are not progressing the way we want them to. Our recruit is not enough. They've already exhausted their use.
The hand moved to look over in the distance, and I could make out, for just a moment, as the camera focused, a dried-up corpse sitting in a meditative position, like downward dog in yoga, but the limbs pushed in unnatural positions. The long black hair the only fresh thing on its body, as if it had been combed and washed with great care. It was Miss Tanaka, his real wife. Dr. Tanaka began twitching, the sound of him choking off camera distorting the limited microphone as he pulled at his collar with his free hand, the makeshift one turning slowly to look at me and cocking to the side, looking at me intently.
I want you to watch,
it croaked, moving out of view as Tanaka's body writhed and convulsed, something sprouting from him with a sickening burst. As he stepped back, thick, shroom-like appendages sprouted from his forehead, ears, and neck, undulating as white eyes focused on me, and a new voice rang out.
I am the wife of Tanaka, of you, of all things.
Tanaka's body shriveled violently as spores began filling the room.
I marry myself to the vulnerable and spread the truth. They give me their bodies, and I give them comfort.
I'm still not interested in joining the freaky fungus club. I don't even like mushrooms. Plus, as I explained to the good doctor, I can't leave the house. Agoraphobic. I shrugged, hands in the air as I apologized.
It matters not. We will try other methods. If this vessel cannot bring us more, we will find other way.
I know he wanted this, but is he going to be all right? I craned my neck to try and see any details about the image fuzzed over with spores, the lens cracking under some unseen pressure. No, nor will you. We've seen what becomes of you. It does not have a happy ending. I cannot tell you if it was Tanaka or his wife, but at that moment, the call disconnected. No screaming or fanfare. Just gone. I tried asking Petra about it, but she deflected and would talk about a more light-hearted neighbor or how Gus was doing. I didn't even know he had a real wife until that point, and the notion of her dying that way disturbed me more than anything else. It was around 3 days later that the janitor showed up to clean out the apartment. He's got his own idiosyncrasies, but he's not got all that many stories I could share. He is, for all intents and purposes, a plague doctor, which, given the spore situation, may have been very appropriate, but not so much when you see him working on fixing the carpets or cleaning a spillage in the lift where someone left too much unnameable fluid. The outfit is a part of him, and even though I've seen thick, coarse hair poking out of parts of the extremely dated outfit, I've never seen him take it off. I don't know too much about him, to be truthful. I see him on a regular basis, and we exchange pleasantries when I'm well enough to go outside. He's French, has a capuchin monkey that never leaves his side, and with Gus, I can totally relate on that front, and has a spray that he has labeled Pour les Rouani. He seems nice enough, but only speaks to the monkey, never to me. The most I've ever gotten out of him is a hello or a good morning. The rest is hurried French to the capuchin, who chews on strange nuts and stares at me as I walk past. The reason I bring him up is late last night they slipped a note under my door, something I want your thoughts on. Because amid so much unusual ongoings past and present, the latter of which I will work my way around to, I promise, there's just a lot of background context first. This may be the most sensible and concerning thing I've received. Do not trust the garbage men. Part 3. I'm an agoraphobic in the strangest apartment complex this side of sanity. With the lockdown going on, I decided now was as good a time as any to start sharing my stories. I'm still not quite sure what to make of the note from the janitor, but as luck would have it, garbage day is this week, so I've got time to consider how I want to approach the subject. Oh, I should probably bring up one thing that happens without any schedule or logical reasoning behind it. I didn't before because it had been a while, and it's the sort of thing I like to try and forget about. But it happened yesterday and left me feeling exhausted, so I feel I should explain myself. There'll be times when I'm going about my day, and I'll get a faint tingling in the back of my neck. It's subtle at first. It doesn't give me any grief, and I do my best to ignore it, like suppressing a sneeze. We all do that sometimes, right? Well, it sometimes goes away, and other times it grows. It turns into a burning sensation, and it steadily strips away my senses. First, my sense of taste, then smell, hearing, eyesight. Thankfully, I have time to lie down before I go blind, so I don't hurt myself, but never my sense of touch. That always seems to stay. I'm left in a state of absolute absence for the longest time. I'll get flashes of sensory information that comes in waves, but I'll still remain in darkness, like I'm being prodded or poked. It's neither pleasant nor horrific. It just is. The one thing that I try my absolute best to forget, however, is when my eyesight returns in the middle of these dark spells. Because it always starts and ends the same, I can't even tell if it's a dream when it's over. There's always a pillar, marble gray and perfectly shaped, alone in the midst of the darkness. I'm being pushed toward it from a great distance until I'm 50 feet away. Then I see spindly fingers wrapping around the sides, slowly, purposefully, as if something unnameable drags its way into view. It sees me as I see it. I scream, but not a single sound comes out. When I wake up, I'm in a cold sweat, as always. Maybe that's why I'm mostly at peace with what goes on around here. Whatever those absences are, they're far more horrifying to me. I've tried asking the council if they know anything on it, and most of them just shrug and call it the great inevitability. Whatever that is. My king baboon, I call King Boomy, Pelanobus modicus, looked at me carefully before saying I'd know before the wrath comes. But before I could ask what that meant, Miss Rumble kicked hairs and he scuttled away. Another thing worth noting is Professor Luda's Black Room. They are some kind of biologist major who repeatedly asks me, and I assume other neighbors, for skin samples. But when I offer, they say the quantity is largely insufficient, and offers to come up and get it done herself. I've had a few chats with her over the years. She's mostly harmless, but until last summer, I didn't know how on earth they were paying for her apartment, as they went on about how they're losing her funding from the university due to breach of guidelines. Once, when they called, I was hoping to get a remedy for the absences, but they just ranted on as always. Luden is a frail, thin, non-binary person in their late 40s, exhausted but full of passion for their job. It was infectious.
They just don't respect true scientific endeavors, Cassidy. I'm trying my best to make the world a better place, but such things do not occur without sacrifices. Wouldn't you agree?
Luden pushed a strand of hair out of their face, tired eyes staring a hole through me on the intercom. Well, you're partially right. You are trying, and I'm sure people appreciate it. I sure as hell do. But the logic of some sacrifices to be made for progress is a slippery slope. You know how some folks ended up, I said, clenching my jaw to try and not state the obvious. They sighed dramatically.
Oh, for heaven's sake, I'm not a monster. I just know that for this to work, for us to take things to the next step, we must solve issues with some degree of nuance and a lot of uncomfortable truths. We have a problem with overpopulation, global warming, food shortages, and now science is falling behind in these problems as well as vaccinations. If you don't believe me now, you will soon. I'll be testing an experiment out tomorrow. Look outside at midnight and see for yourself.
They hung up, a slightly uncomfortable passion ringing in their voice as she did. I tried to push it from my mind and go about my day, later hearing some college students downstairs ranting about cheap clinical trials and heading upstairs. I was a little worried, but I was sure her experiments were on the up and up. Luden's apartment is a couple of floors above mine, and I can hear them ranting about failing experiments when I'm watering or feeding my plants, though I don't think they know that part. I got on with the work I had backlogged and went outside at 5 minutes, staring out into the black night, another apartment block mirroring me and the faint glow my lantern gave off. A few moments passed before a horrific black light beamed out of her apartment, illuminating innumerable figures standing in their windows on the opposite block, vacant, skinless, and staring open-mouthed at me. They were frozen in horror as Professor Luda shrieked with laughter.
Oh my goodness, it works. The corpse slide works.
Luden was hysterical as someone beside them groaned.
No. You must stay still. You will not receive compensation if you do not stay still.
I could barely make out what was above me due to the scaling of the apartment balconies and the brightness of the light, but for a split second, it looked like she was holding a student by her shoulders and projecting the light through him. Though every figure in the apartment block was different, there seemed to be one taking shape that looked similar to him. There was a vile, pealing sound, followed by a shriek, before finally a thump. Just like that, the light went off. When I tried Professor Luda again, they didn't pick up. I waited a while to see if they'd come back out onto the balcony or if the students left, but neither came to pass. The last thing I heard before I went to sleep was a crawling sound running down the outside walls. A soft, wet, slapping sound against my windows, followed swiftly by a splattering on the ground. I didn't dare look, and I have no intention of going to my windows for a few days. While I waited for my downstairs neighbor to FaceTime and help me with the garbage men, I decided to do some cleaning, hold a meeting with the Spider Council over territorial disputes. They like it when I mediate. While I waited for my takeout from Mr. Moloch's Steak and Bake, they did the best ribs, and I'd been having a craving all day. Even seeing Gus munch down on a fly had my mouth watering. Don't judge me. Moloch's was an amazing restaurant that had seemed to be quick with my order. They had an eclectic menu that wasn't too pricey, and aside from their mascot, a creepy cartoon bull with the torso of a man, a huge belly, and an even wider grin, the place was awesome. They were even respectful and understanding of my agoraphobia, and always had someone come up to deliver it to my front door, never making the prospect of unwanted contact an issue. Within 30 minutes, the fateful knock was at my door, and I started unlocking the latches when I stopped midway, realizing there was still someone stood on the other side. Confused, I peered through the peephole and felt an immediate sense of foreboding. Staring back at me was someone, or something, wearing a bull's head, fur still attached, and a black fluid leaking down the sides of their oversized beige overcoat that seemed to undulate as they stood on the spot, their hands wrapped in hollowed-out bear's claws, feebly clutching a paper bag with the Mr. Moloch logo on it. "Hi, my delivery notes should state my requirements. You can leave the bag there," I called out. The delivery man dipping his head to look at my order, hands shaking, before looking back up at me as his whole body shook more. Slowly, mechanically, he lowered his hands and dropped it on the ground before staring for a few more moments and walking towards the elevator. I waited until I was sure I heard him enter it before snatching my food at a speed not even my spiders could match and slamming the door, the smell immediately setting me at ease. I could barely contain my excitement as I opened the bag, moving my receipt and napkins aside to demolish these succulent ribs, the smell of barbecue and well-cooked meat making my stomach growl. I bit hard into my third rib, and sauce went all over my table. "Oh, damn it, Gus, don't touch that. It'll make your tongue fall off," I called, seeing him slowly crawling out of my pocket, freezing as I called his name, eyes shamefully looking away before crawling back in. I sighed and grabbed some napkins, spying my receipt and some crude writing across it. I didn't even notice my neighbor, the Baron, calling me as my eyes widened. My stomach contracted, and I felt every bump on my skin rise in horror. Professor Luden's corpse light, now the only thing I could think about as I rushed to the bathroom to vomit. Below the receipt cost was a disclaimer, scraped into the paper alongside small, repeated, "No" messages all over. Mr. Moloch's succulent meat, organic, cruelty-free, low-fat, and good for the environment. How do we do it? That's the Moloch secret. Receipt graciously provided by Luden Research Institute. That was no beige overcoat. This was not meat I recognized.